It's a JBL Xtreme 3. Everyone's really excited. Xtreme 3's just come out. It's got an extreme price. It's got SBC codec. It's 280 quid. In the UK, sterling money, 280 quid. That's not funny. Is it worth it? Because you really want to know. Yeah, but come on, do it. What does it sound like against the pound for pound world champion? Everybody loves the Soundcore Motion Plus because value for money, you cannot beat this speaker. Some people, a few people, not many, you know, not quite in love with the speaker, but most people who get the speaker think it's fantastic value for money. I do. I call it my pound for pound world champion. But the thing is, you got one Soundcore Motion Plus. All right, big deal, mate. Yeah, 70 quid, but it's a £280 speaker. Come on, is that a fair test, really? Well, let's make it fair. Let's try two Soundcore Motion Pluses, because two Soundcore Motion Pluses in lovely stereo is still half the price of the JBL extremely priced Xtreme 3. So we're going to compare them. I'll give you the quick specs just to give you the comparison there. We already know that's ridiculously cheap, that's ridiculously expensive. About 70, 80 quid depending on the deal, about 280 quid, but obviously as time goes on, well, hopefully that is going to come down. In terms of battery, been lots of people saying, you said you didn't know what the battery was, and then you said, well, it seems to be half. I never said it was half the value of the JBL Xtreme 2 battery. And to avoid confusion, because a lot of people, I'm not getting that, it depends on the voltage that the speaker is running at as to whether they say it's 5,000 milliamp hours or 10,000 milliamp hours. So if we go to watt hours, no confusion, 24.8 watt hours the battery capacity. Obviously, bigger speaker, bigger battery, 36.3 watt hours. I already said SBC codec, and yet 70 quid speaker. JBL, hang your head in shame. 70 quid speaker has aptX. They are serious about their speakers. The Soundcore brand seems to be taking the world by storm in terms of value for money. SBC for 280 quid. Yes, it's got a bigger battery. Yes, it's got a bigger logo. And yes, it's got Bluetooth 5.1 versus Bluetooth 5 for the JBL, for the Soundcore Motion Plus. They both do stereo pairing. They both have USB-C. It's the modern world, USB-C connection. Just bear in mind, you get an all singing, all dancing charger with the JBL Xtreme 3, which means according to the charger, you could be charging this up to 60 watts, whereas you're always going to be stuck at 5 volts, 2 amps, I believe, which is 10 watts charging power for the Motion Plus. Interesting thing about the Motion Plus is I get a magical 7 hours in maximum when I test this, and I have retested it. I really do get 7 hours on maximum volume. All of you guys, some of you say you're getting now, but most people seem to be getting on the current gen Soundcore Motion Plus, you seem to be getting 3 hours at maximum volume. So bear in mind, I say 7 hours, and 7 hours with my custom EQ settings. I am going to use my custom EQ settings when I do my tests, but just bear in mind, most people get about 3 hours, and I believe that, you know, that's basically going to be just base up. My custom EQ will sap that battery even quicker. Other things to note, it's just a 30 watt powered speaker. It's got no chance against the 50 watt JBL Xtreme 3, but hang on a sec. Yeah, 50 watts. If you plug the USB-C lead in, and of course use their all singing, all dancing charger, so it's got full power, and then you'll get your 50 watts. 2 kilos, well, it's a bit, you know, lighter than the JBL Xtreme. That's quite good news, isn't it? Except that this is 1 kilo basically, so it's half the weight, half the size of the JBL Xtreme 3. 30 watts, almost half the power on paper. It has no chance. There's no point in doing the video. It has no chance against the JBL Xtreme 3. All those of you who do like to have a laugh at the specs, I am one of them. Officially 50 hertz to 40 kilohertz. So bear in mind, it's debatable, you know, if any of you can hear over 20 kilohertz. This actually rolls off pretty sharpish after 12 kilohertz. And to suggest it goes to 40 kilohertz is a little bit silly. Actually, quite believable, 53.5 hertz to 20 kilohertz, the official specs on the JBL Xtreme 3. That's more real world specs. Woofers both have tweeters and passive rads. The thing to note, the tweeters at 30 millimeter are actually bigger in the Motion Plus than the tweeters at 20mm in the JBL Xtreme 3. And the big deal is they're on the sides and they're angled out, so you get a nice dispersion of the sound rather than a face-on tweeters. The other thing you probably want to know is latency. That's the interesting thing with the Motion Plus, because it's not too bad with YouTube. I get 80 milliseconds of latency. That's just about noticeable, but doable. JBL never been good with their Bluetooth latency, and even on their modern 5.1 Bluetooth, I'm getting about 140 milliseconds, and that's obvious lag in terms of the image to the voice is speaking. It's like, I'm talking. Whereas it's just about doable with the Motion Plus. But having said that, when I play my videos locally on my device, the lag's worse. I was getting about 140 milliseconds, so 130 milliseconds average. But bear in mind, it's much better on YouTube than it was playing local files. You can drop both of these in water. This is IPX7, that's IP67, which means not dustproof, as well as can submerge it up to 30 meters in a meter of water with both of these speakers. So they're okay at the beach, they're okay at the pool. You're not in that imminent danger of wrecking your device. So quite exciting. Can a budget speaker really take on extreme logo of the JBL Xtreme 3? The talk is, okay, it's got a sweet spot on the JBL Xtreme 3. After 80% volume, it doesn't increase its bass. This will increase bass all the way up. Obviously, relatively, the bass will drop off, but each volume step gives you a bit more bass. JBL Xtreme 3, you hit 80%, you hit a hard limit. Volume up, volume up, volume up. Nothing is happening, except that the mids and the highs are going that much higher. So you're going to get a bit more of a shrill sound, a thinner sound. So it has a sweet spot. Probably around 60 to 80, well, probably around 70%. If it's 60 to 80, it's probably around 70% volume. So it's not, and that's the thing, there's no bass adjustment on the JBL Xtreme 3. There is bass there at low volume, but some speakers will give you a massive bass adjustment. JBL Xtreme 3 doesn't. So there's a narrow band in which it has a sweet spot. So it's going to be interesting. 40% is quite a low volume. It's going to tell you real differences between these two speakers at a lowish volume. Of course, you could put it on 1%, ridiculously low. But I think this is a low volume, but a real world at low volume. Something you'll probably have it in the background, but still be able to hear it. 40%. I say 40%, of course. What does that mean in the real world? Because I'm adjusting the volumes to be about the same, which means I am 40% on my Xtreme 3. I'm 36%. Seems to play a bit louder at the lower volumes on the single Motion Plus. And I'm also going to do a pair of Motion Pluses. They go louder, so I'm playing those at 30% volume. Wishes from people that don't really understand the feeling that we have. There's gonna be some bad wishes from people that don't really understand it's that we have. Oh baby, keep loving, keep loving me just like you do it, like you do it, like you. Hips don't lift, so we keep growing just like we do it, like you do it, like you. bear in mind, £280 versus 70 quid. You don't expect much. And at the lower volumes, you have to say the Soundcore Motion Plus is a little bit muddy when you hear it in A/B comparisons. Sounds fine if you listen to it on its own, but in these comparisons, you do hear how, well, it's quite bass heavy. Now you could say, well, that's good. It's got bass adjustment at the lower volumes. And of course, I record it at the lower volumes, and then of course you play it at maximum volume. It slants the actual point. So I would say if you really want to know what the 40% volume test is, turn the volume down. Don't put it on full blast because you really want to hear what's going on, because that takes away the whole point of the bass adjustment on the Soundcore Motion Plus. Having said that, it is muddy. Lower volumes are not a strong point of this budget speaker, the Soundcore Motion Plus. And the Xtreme 3, by comparison, sounds like it's almost crystal clear. It isn't crystal clear at all, but it's okay. It's not dynamic is the point. So it's not going to be a great listen at low volumes, but there is some bass there, but it sounds quite ordinary. It doesn't sound like it's a big speaker. It sounds like it's a little thing and you'd be saying, that's all right, something you took home. It cost you 50 quid. You didn't expect much. You said, well, that's all right, I don't mind listening to that. But you've got JBL Xtreme 3. You're thinking thump, thump, thump bass. We don't get that at low volumes. You get that around the sweet spot. Now, when you get a pair of Soundcore Motion Pluses, it does sound quite sweet. It does open up the sound and it does narrow the difference, even at these low volumes, between the speakers, because you're not so aware of the muddiness, and what you are aware of is the mellow kind of sound you get from a pair of these in stereo. Still half the price of the JBL Xtreme 3. JBL Xtreme 3 still is all about the bass. No treble. Well, you've got some treble. In fact, you've got quite a lot of treble. 12 kilohertz peak is obvious, and it's still obvious at 40% volume. Some people are going to like it, some people are not going to like it. But what it does do is give you pretty much a crystal clear, not crystal clear, but a very clear sound. It's not particularly natural, but it certainly cuts through the track. You're going to get a clear, what I perceive a clear high end. Now, it doesn't roll off till about 60 hertz, whereas we're rolling off already at 80 hertz on the Motion Plus. So there's your clue, and that's what you'd expect. This is about low deep bass. JBL Xtreme 3, buy it if you want low deep bass. You will get low deep bass.
You will get low deep bass.
Soundcore Motion Plus is not going to give you deep bass, but you will get a thump. Thing to remember is upper bass, mid bass, you can get a thump. Some people will perceive that as bass and say, oh, I've got loads of bass. If you like your movies and you're used to, say, a home movie setup where there's dollops and dollops of low bass, that's the sort of bass you're going to get from the JBL Xtreme 3, and you won't get from the Motion Plus. It's all about making up with some punch in that mid-upper bass that you're losing on the deep bass. And according to your taste, you may like one or the other, but that is the strong point of the JBL Xtreme 3. Remember, low deep bass. It's at 50 hertz, where technically you probably think, well, that's where your low bass restarts, because, you know, if you're buying a subwoofer, you're adding a subwoofer, you know, 20 to 50 hertz is where you're going to expect your subwoofer to come into play. So at 50 hertz, 16 dB up. Remember, double the power is 3 dB. 16 decibels is huge, huge, huge. It's there. So in other words, it's the difference between saying no deep bass, a dollop of deep bass. We'll have to take the volume up a bit, see what's going on. I'm going to say 60%. Well, 60% actually means 66% on the Xtreme 3, 63% on a single Motion Plus. A pair of Motion Pluses are playing at 56% volume.
Does it happen to you that you don't understand? You're so strong and so bad, but you're weak with your man, and you let him treat you like you wouldn't let anyone. Does it happen to you when you let down your guard? Every woman feels like this, but still calls it love. You know that a tongue doesn't love mean he's supposed to protect you. Why'd it have to be that way? Be that way. They always take advantage cause they know we'll stay. Let them be that way. Be that way. You'll see just what you'll get. My heart is on the line. Let him go and you'll be fine. Don't you be afraid, you'll be sorry that you stayed. You know you're better off without him. My heart is on the line. Let him go and you'll be fine. You just gotta learn you're a price that must be earned. Don't settle if he doesn't deserve you. Does it because of your ego. Does it happen to you like it happens to me, that you gave in the end when you're not really sorry? You're sick of it all and you just need someone that will hold you. Why'd it have to be that way? Be that way. They always take advantage cause they know we'll stay. Let them be that way. Be that way. You'll see just what you'll get. My heart is on the line. Let him go and you'll be fine. Don't you be afraid, you'll be sorry that you stayed. You know you're better off without him. My heart is on the line. Let him go and you'll be fine. You just gotta learn you're a prize that must be earned. Don't settle if he doesn't deserve you.
JBL Xtreme 3 versus a single Motion Plus. At these volumes, Xtreme 3 is streets ahead in terms of actual genuine lower bass. So at 60 Hz, 9 dB up on the Motion Plus, and at 50 Hz, 15 dB up on a single Motion Plus. You can see the actual difference in the bass. If we look around here, 80 Hz and down, that's where you've got the roll off on the Motion Plus. It's simply not there, whereas the JBL Xtreme 3 does retain there. 80 Hz down to the mid 50 Hz. Motion Plus, we are rolled off from basically 80 Hz. The JBL Xtreme 3, of course, has that 12 kHz peak, but it has a little bit of a dip just below that 12 kHz. Kind of balances it in some ways, but Motion Plus, there's a peak around 8 kHz, but then there's a rapid roll off, so it does not extend as high on the Motion Plus. The real difference with a pair of the Motion Pluses is just a more open sound. In some ways, more mellow.
So pretty much as it was at lower volumes. Obviously at these higher volumes now, if you was listening at the appropriate volume, you'd hear becoming more dynamic now. You're now getting that thump thump to the bass. You're now getting what you're paying for at around 60% from the JBL Xtreme 3. The low bass is there. It's not there on the Motion Plus, but you do still get a sense of bass of a thumping bass because it's quite mids, upper bass heavy. Should point out, I'm using my custom settings. My custom settings are the ones you see on these clips in the bottom right hand side. And you'll also notice I do push the upper bass on my EQ settings because I think it handles it well. And it really gives the sense of that thump to the bass that otherwise would not be there. So that 150 Hz slider, if it was flat, it would be about -3 on that EQ scale. And I'm going to like +3. When I play a pair of them though, it does become a bit much. So you'll notice when I play a pair of Motion Pluses, I am bringing that 150 Hz slider down to just even it out a little bit. It's still pushed a bit. It's still, even at 0 dB, that's above what it would be if it was flat. So just watch out for that. But a pair of Motion Pluses, definitely a nice sweet sound, which makes the 12 kHz peak, 12.5 kHz peak on the Xtreme 3 start to sound a bit harsh. I mean, at these volumes, it's not really that harsh and you're really sensitive to it. But when you hear it in comparison to a pair of these mellow sounding, sweet sounding Motion Pluses, it can sound a bit harsh, but the thump's there. And so it's all about that thump, that deep thump to me. At 60%, gonna have to push it even higher. Let's really see what's going on. It's an Xtreme speaker. We're expecting it to do extreme things around 85%. You know, around the limit of its bass.
Baby, I'm new to love. you forget about it. Your love so deep got me drowning. You take me up to the stars, right up to the stars, and I feel you healing the scars. Ooh, baby, I'm new to love. Yeah, baby, I'm new to love. And baby, you still might not know. You struck me like a lightning bolt, right about the blue sky, yeah. Never felt so new to love. I never felt so new, oh no, to love. Oh baby, with my love, set me on fire in your arms. Oh baby, with my love. Life is better when you're on top. 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 If I'm gonna work you, then I'd rather be the boss. Send you to your Danny if you wanna grease me up, baby. I call you Gabby Clicks, baby, maybe we can spark. If you're gonna ride, take me to the body shop. If I go fast, you can cut me like a cost, daddy. Oh baby, with my love, set me on fire in your arms. Oh baby, with my love. Life is better when you're on top. 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 Life is better when you're on top.
So we are just past the sweet spot of the JBL Xtreme 3. So the difference in that low bass is not quite as much as it was at lower volumes. Having said that, we're still about 12 dB down with our Motion Plus than we are compared to our JBL Xtreme 3. However, because it's still near enough to the sweet spot, we're still getting a full-on deep end to that bass, enough to make this sound a little bit like a paper bag, that type of bass. It's soggy. Ooh, it's not a tight slam. It's a little bit soggy is how I would describe it. However, it does have a nice spread because of the tweeters to the sound. It does sound sweet and mellow when you have a pair of them. And when you hear the 12 kHz peak on the JBL Xtreme 3, can sound a bit on the harsh side. But if your ears are not that sensitive, it probably just sounds really, really clear. However, it still sounds clear on the Motion Plus because at these volumes, it's stronger in the lower mids as well, not just that upper bass a little bit heavy. We now have an advantage in the lower mids compared to how the frequency response is on the Xtreme 3. So, it's still going to come down to what we probably already knew. Do you like deep bass or do you want a sweet sound? And would you rather have a pair? And now, I should mention, a lot of people are saying they have problems with a pair of Motion Pluses when they're more than a 1 meter apart. I don't. Mine work fine. I've not had cutouts. They have worked flawlessly for over a year that I've had them. I'm pointing out that some people say it doesn't work great for them. I have to point that out because I'm trying to tell you, £140 on a pair of these sounds great. For that mellow sound compared to the £280, the twice the price of the JBL Xtreme 3. It's an extreme speaker. There must be something really, really extreme about it. We're going to find out when we go to maximum volume. Of course, maximum volume means putting the charger in, and putting a charger doesn't mean any old USB-C. You're going to have to put the all singing, all dancing 60 watts charger to get the full amount of power that it can handle. And then it will get your 50 watts rated power from your JBL Xtreme 3. Now, as we go to high volumes, I am holding my head up. My EQ settings can be a little bit over the top, a little bit more than the speaker can handle in terms of bass and distortion. So if it's a particularly bass heavy track, though, that upper bass will give you a little bit of distortion. It hasn't killed my speaker, but it can sound a bit annoying to you on particular tracks. So maximum volume, I am bringing that slider down the same place I had it for a pair. Just bear that in mind. That's all I've done. The 80 hertz is still full whack up, but my 150 hertz slider is now at 0, which is still pushing over and above the where it would be if it was flat, which would be about -3. So maximum volume.
Maximum volume, even after you've plugged in the mains lead into the JBL Xtreme 3, a pair of Motion Pluses goes louder. It's more open. In terms of actual peak, 1.5 dB up. LUFS, not a lot in it. LUFS, perceived sound, but in terms of actual power, RMS, -18.3, we're 1 decibel up on a pair of Motion Pluses. Still, it can't break the laws of physics. It can't go as deep as the JBL Xtreme 3, even though the JBL Xtreme 3 doesn't increase bass after 80% volume. So there's less of a difference now. -38 at 50. There's a 10 dB difference. Lower volumes, there was a 15 dB difference. 65 hertz, -26.3. About 3.5 dB louder on the Xtreme 3 than the stereo pair of the Motion Pluses, but that is much less of a difference than lower volumes. And then the Motion Pluses will kick it in terms of upper bass. Around 3 dB up, 100 hertz to 200 hertz. That's where the Motion Plus can really kick it. And that's obviously when you've plugged the mains lead in. Battery versus a single Motion Plus. Well, yeah, the Xtreme 3 is louder by about 1 decibel. In terms of peaks, the Motion Plus is neck and neck, in my measurement, slightly up on the JBL Xtreme 3. A single Motion Plus, now about the same in terms of upper bass against JBL Xtreme 3 on battery, a little bit up at 100 hertz, but then the Xtreme 3 takes over again at lower frequencies, deeper bass, 13 dB up at 50 hertz.
So Obviously, 2 Motion Pluses without the mains lead plugged in go louder than a single JBL Xtreme 3 at twice the price and with its power lead plugged in. May or may not be a shock to you, but this is quite a special speaker. Is it the world's greatest speaker? No. Is it the best value? Probably. 2 of them will go louder. If the volume is all what it's all about for you, there's your answer. Now, you've still got deeper bass on the JBL Xtreme 3, but you've got the same bass as you had at 80% and below, which means sounds a bit more screechy, more thin than it did at 80%, 70%, because the bass is the same, but the mids and the highs are now have now been raised, so relatively sounds a bit screechy. And at that 12 kilohertz peak, we are 12 dB up on the Motion Plus, where you wouldn't want it. So it's not like saying that we're up in bass. So there's 12 dB less at 12 kilohertz than there is on the Xtreme 3. So that really does make it in an AB. You do hear how that has the potential to be screechy, making the pair of Motion Pluses, even the single Motion Plus, sound a little bit on the mellow side. But they do sound nice as a stereo pair. On battery, yes, big deal. The JBL Xtreme 3 goes louder than 1 Motion Plus. £280 versus £70. Oh wow, what a shocker. The JBL Xtreme 3 goes louder, but not by much. And in fact, the actual peak, and remember, peak is instantaneous noise level, sound level, was at 102.5 versus 102.2. Nothing in it. But in terms of the overall track, maybe a decibel louder for the JBL Xtreme 3. £280 SBC codec goes 1 dB louder than a single Motion Plus. Is that a shock to you? I hope it is a shock, because it shows you what these companies could do. I wonder what that would sound like with an aptX codec. Maybe it would sound exactly the same. I don't know, but it would have been nice to find out. Christmas is coming. We could have had a nice Christmas present finally on the JBL Xtreme 3s. All the money people are paying for these speakers, and they can't be bothered to lay out for the aptX license fee. I assume that's the reason. Don't know, maybe there's a firmware limit or a hardware limitation. They can't, oh bless them, JBL, they can't pay the money which they wanted to pay for the licensing fees. So obviously we're already 16 decibels difference at 50 hertz at these maximum volumes. Battery versus battery, about 13 dB. So it's still a big difference, but not that much, because we now got that much more upper bass. We've actually got a decibel more at 100 hertz on the Motion Plus, which can make up for a lot of that. Look, it's going to come down to taste. There's only one speaker here. If you want a low-end wallop, and that would be the only reason, surely, you're looking at the JBL Xtreme 3. If you want huge party volumes, that isn't what you're getting, because all that power, most of that power, a lot of that power, some of that power is going to drive that bass. Always remember, it takes more power to drive the low end than it does to drive the high end. That's why outdoor modes normally have a bass cut, because it's not easy to drive the rest of it. And in perceived terms, it goes louder. Could shatter your eardrums with the high end, but that's not the point. But if you're buying this to always hear the low end, you're going to have to give up some volume to get that low end, because that amp has to drive, takes a lot more of that amp to drive the low end. So look, it's still great value, and they sound great. It becomes even more mellow. I wouldn't, because I don't really describe a single one of them as mellow, but it's quite open and detailed. It's just missing that low deep bass, which we can forgive it at the price. But when you have a pair of them, it becomes mellow. It becomes quite easy on the ear. Well, it does to me anyway. JBL Xtreme 3 is a lot bigger. It's a lot easier to carry 2 of these, isn't it, like that, than one of these. Obviously, you do get the strap, I have to point out, but I haven't put my strap on. My strap on. Never mind. Okay. It's coming up to Christmas. I hope you get an idea of what you may or may not want for Christmas in that bag that Santa is going to fill for you. Hope you got something out of my video, and I thank you for watching.